gentlemen, we welcome you to Paris's prestigious La Villette Center for Science and Industry and present our host for this international television event, Mr. Telly Savalas.
Welcome to Paris and to the adventure of a lifetime. On a bitterly cold night in 1912, the Royal Mail steamer RMS Titanic, the greatest ocean liner of the day, struck an iceberg on her maiden voyage to New York and plunged 2.5 miles to the bottom of the Atlantic. Of the 2,207 people aboard, 1,502 lost their lives. The worst maritime disaster in peacetime history. It was the end of an era and the beginning of a legend. Of the 705 survivors, some in the few lifeboats, some clinging to wreckage, most watched in horror as the enormous ship, lights ablaze virtually to the end, plunged to the bottom. When the Titanic disappeared on that cold April night, no one dared to dream any trace of her would be seen again. Yet, you are passengers in tonight's voyage and will return to the Titanic in a spectacular dive to the bottom with the best deep-sea diving team in the world today, the underwater experts of the French Institute Ifremer. Tonight, we will show you for the first time artifacts which have been lost to the world for more than 75 years. We will reveal new evidence which could explain why the Titanic went down. And we will open the recovered safe and valise and discover what surprises they contain. So stay with us.
Live from Paris, France, and the La Villette Center for Science and Industry. Here again, your host, Telly Savalas.
The Titanic was different. She was the biggest, the best, the most luxurious. You fill in the superlatives, she was all of them. Most of all, people called her unsinkable. When she went down, the disaster was so stunning that overnight, the word changed from unsinkable to unthinkable. The world learned a lot about the arrogance of technical expertise. Most of the rich during the Edwardian era never felt any reason to conceal the trappings of wealth. They wore their luxurious furs, their elaborate jewelry, like badges of honor and emblems of identity. The gowns required by a lady of elegance took weeks of handwork, embroidery, and beading. Moving them around required dozens of trunks, bags, satchels, valises. The entire generation had come to accept this opulence, this flamboyant display, as a way of life that would never end. The story of the Titanic really begins in one of the most important townhouses in London. It's called Downshire House. It stands where it always has, in London's fashionable Belgrave Square. In May 1907, it was the scene of a very important dinner party. It was then the home of Lord William James Peary, chairman of Holland and Wolff, one of the great shipbuilding firms of Britain, and for many years, shipbuilders to the White Star Line, one of the world's leading steamship companies. And coming to dinner that night, J. Bruce Ismay, managing director of the White Star Line. Before the evening is over, they'll agree to build a series of transatlantic liners so enormous, they'll dwarf every other ship afloat. For elegance, comfort, and size, they'll be unrivaled. The Olympic and the Titanic will be the first two of these giant ships. They'll be built here at Holland and Wolff's yards in Belfast, Ireland. The green hills of Belfast still produce the army of shipbuilders Holland and Wolff have put to work for 125 years, here at its Queen's Island Works. It was at this location that the Olympic, the Titanic, and later the Britannic were built. By March 1909, in specially built gantries which tower over Holland and Wolff's Belfast yards, construction is well underway on the first ship, the Olympic. Coming fast alongside, her sister ship, the Titanic. So immense are these two liners that they occupy space normally used for the construction of 3 ships. Everything that goes into them is the best and often the biggest that money can buy. From their 30-foot panels of heavy steel plating to their 3-story high reciprocating engines, everything is state-of-the-art. These double-bottomed, triple-screw giants are built to be unsinkable. Lord Peary and Bruce Ismay do nothing to discourage the public's impression that the liners are, in fact, unsinkable. By the spring of 1911, the workforce at Holland and Wolff approaches 15,000 people, and the first 2 ships are nearing completion. Weighing in at 46,000 tons, the Titanic has become the largest moving object ever built by man. If stood on end, she would be even higher than the world's then tallest skyscraper, New York's Woolworth Building. Every link in her anchor chain weighs 175 pounds. It took a team of 10 horses to pull this anchor through the streets of Belfast. May 31st, 1911, more than 100,000 people turned out to see the Titanic launched. Now, if you thought a bottle of this excellent French champagne was smashed over the bow the day the Titanic was launched, you'd be wrong. In the long tradition of the White Star Line, none of its ships was ever christened, including the Titanic. At 13 minutes past noon, the release lever was pulled, and it took the Titanic just over a minute to slide gracefully into Belfast's River Lagan. The Titanic inspired many myths